I've got a friend who is a devout atheist, and for really good reasons. He had a rough life as a kid. Some really bad things happened to him, and he just doesn't believe that God exists. And every time we get together, he asks me, Tom, how can you believe in an invisible God that you've never seen? Show me God, and then maybe I can believe in him. And I've pondered that question. How do we show an invisible God? How does an invisible God become visible in our world? I heard this story this week. I want to share it with you. It's just a radical story. It actually comes from Memphis in 1878. But here's the backstory. In 1872, a woman named Sister Constance came to Memphis, Tennessee to serve at St. Mary's Cathedral. They were working on a school for orphans of the Civil War and also to care for the people in the area around Memphis. Now, in that day, and like today, nuns were kind of an oddity. Nobody really knew what to do with them, and these nuns were mocked by a lot of the people, but they tried to do their work. Then in August 1878, the school had been let out. Sister Constance and another nun had gone on vacation. Suddenly, yellow fever broke out around Memphis, and people began to freak out. In fact, there's stories of so many people were at the train station trying to get out of the city that some people were actually trampled to death. Because 5 years previously, yellow fever hit Memphis, and 2,000 people died. So everyone was on the run. When Sister Constance and the other nun heard about this, they were on the run as well, but they were running back into Memphis. In fact, people offered to give them a country house so they could work in the city but live in the country. They said, no, we're staying in the city. They were surrounded by death. People actually left their loved ones to die alone in their houses. And these nuns of St. Mary's Cathedral, plus some other nuns, some Protestant missionaries, and even a woman who owned a bordello, decided to stay in the city and to care for the sick and the dying. In her diary, Sister Constance writes of this experience. She was going through the city, and she went into a house, and she found two children who were afraid and alone. Both of their parents were dead in the house. Their uncle had delirium from the yellow fever, and Sister Constance, it took her 24 hours to be able to get the parents buried, but also able to take the children back to the cathedral to care for them. These nuns were literally walking around through death. It wasn't unusual for them to see 7, 8, 9 bodies piled up in a wagon going through the city. The city was covered with lime because they were trying to protect from yellow fever. There was a lot of people killing one another. There was also a lot of thieves in the city, and there were the nuns and those who were caring for the sick and the dying. At one point during this epidemic, 70 people a day were dying. These nuns walked in the midst of death, caring for the sick, and the best that they could do was just comfort them as they died. Sister Constance was 33 years old when she contracted yellow fever, and she ended up dying because of this epidemic. In fact, most of the priests who were there at the beginning, the other nuns, all died. Only 2 of them survived of that original crew that was at St. Mary's Cathedral. Others had come in to help. When the epidemic ended, because winter came and the mosquitoes were killed that were causing yellow fever, the people eventually came back into the city, and they saw a different thing when they saw these nuns. When they saw the nuns who had survived and the priests who had stayed, they saw God. They saw God in the act in the midst of these people's lives because they stayed and offered compassion. Do you want to make God visible? Do you want to make God visible in an invisible world? Practice compassion. I love this verse from 1 John. It says, "Dear children, we ought also to love one another. No one has ever seen God, but when we love one another, God lives in us, and his love is made complete in us." In other words, because God loves us, we love other people, and when we love other people, God's love is shown. It's made complete in the world. I would encourage you to show people this invisible God by showing very visible acts of compassion. Risk your life. Do something radical for the sake of another and allow the world to see a God who loves them completely. I just want to give it up for who they call the Martyrs of Memphis and to give thanks that they made an invisible God very visible in a very difficult situation.